The global trade regime has long favored large multinational corporations at the expense of workers and the environment, because the corporations and their lobbyists have deep pockets and they can join the closed-door negotiations and influence trade deals. Moreover, trade rules themselves were written long before governments were contemplating how to tackle climate change. And several of the rules are fundamentally at odds with the types of actions that governments must take to address climate change and transition to clean energy economies. Every country should have the right to set its own clean energy future, and buy local rules are a standard policy tool to foster, nurture, and grow new industries. They can help us towards a clean energy future by cultivating domestic renewable energy firms that promote strong climate policies. And buy local policies can also benefit workers and bring in new constituencies to advocate for increased clean energy production. But according to outdated trade rules, these kinds of policies can be ruled as illegal subsidies for according less favorable treatment to the goods produced by other countries. If a policy is found illegal, that government may be forced to water down or eliminate the program, or else face onerous trade sanctions. And particularly in the early stages of countries' development, it is critical that governments have policy space to nurture and grow domestic industries. And that includes renewable energy industries. History shows that governments need a range of policy tools, including local content requirements, to cultivate and support such industries until they are internationally competitive. So, some examples from just the last decade. Ontario, Canada enacted a policy that paid wind and solar energy producers more money per kilowatt hour generated if a certain percentage of that producer's costs originated from Ontario. The program had successfully reduced climate-disrupting emissions while creating thousands of green jobs. But the European Union and Japan took Canada to court at the World Trade Organization and won. 3 weeks later, Ontario eliminated its buy local provisions and ended incentives for large-scale clean energy projects. Another example, India implemented a federal solar local production program, and within 5 years went from having virtually no solar capacity to boasting one of the world's fastest growing solar industries. But the United States claimed that this policy violated WTO rules and won. India then retaliated and brought its own WTO dispute against the United States, successfully challenging several similar US renewable energy programs across 8 states. And today we are seeing trade partners, especially the European Union, threatening to launch a trade dispute against the United States over domestic production requirements in the Inflation Reduction Act. We don't know yet what will happen with the IRA, but in the other examples I mentioned, the main takeaway is that taxpayer dollars are going to the legal costs of fighting these trade disputes, and governments are being ordered to roll back their climate policies by international trade tribunals that prioritize adherence to corporate-rigged rules over climate objectives. To avoid the worst outcomes from climate change, humanity has less than a decade to make substantial progress toward eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. We quite literally do not have time to try to twist climate initiatives to comport with antiquated trade rules, nor to litigate such policies in dispute settlement claims. This is why we are calling for a climate peace clause, a binding commitment by governments to refrain from using trade and investment agreements to challenge other countries' climate policies. Now, importantly, this is not something that would be imposed on governments or a way for governments to declare for themselves a get-out-of-jail-free pass. It is a commitment to not launch disputes against the policies of climate policies of other countries. So it sets an example and signals to other countries that they have the go-ahead to take the actions they need to. And if a dispute arises, it's not going to be coming from you. A government could unilaterally make such a commitment, do so in cooperation with one or more other governments, or write a climate peace clause into an existing or future trade agreement. So a climate peace clause, or rather many of them, would reverse the current paradigm by which climate is subordinate to trade. With a climate peace clause, measures that a country asserts, backed by basic evidence, aims to mitigate climate change and or support a clean energy transition will be protected from trade challenges. This would create the much needed space for governments to adopt and maintain the climate policies needed to create green jobs and meet their commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, this is not just a progressive pipe dream. The groups speaking here today recently joined more than 150 US environmental groups in calling for a climate peace clause. And a climate peace clause was also included in the UN's 5th Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment Report. So the climate peace clause would help with the problem of governments attacking each other's climate policies. But we also have to deal with corporations attacking government policies through the investor-state dispute settlement system, or ISDS. This is basically a special international legal system that lets multinational corporations sue governments and get taxpayer compensation over policies that affect their future expected profits. You all might have seen the John Oliver story a couple years ago about Philip Morris, the tobacco company, suing Uruguay over its laws requiring health information on cigarette packaging. That was ISDS. And ISDS has been used repeatedly to attack climate policies. Or maybe you've heard about TC Energy, the Canadian company behind the Keystone XL pipeline. And this company is currently trying to use ISDS to get $15 billion from US taxpayers over the Biden administration's decision to revoke the permit for that pipeline. So if the United States, a country with immense political and economic power, cannot act on climate without facing trade attacks by both governments and corporations, how can we expect other countries to do so? So this is why it's so important for the US to help lead the way toward a total end to ISDS and a climate peace clause on governmental trade disputes.